Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld Team Editor Keith Rayner, and we are rocking and rolling. Keith, Super Bowl, Pat Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs get the job done. They beat the Eagles in a shootout. What'd you think of the game?
It wasn't the script that leaked online, but it wasn't that far off, and it certainly felt like, it could have been that script with rewrites. Sometimes a movie script will leak and they'll quickly do some rewrites.
Yeah, just throw you off the pace a little bit. I
actually think the whole sports is rigged thing is very funny. Don't buy into it at all, but it's storybook ending, right? I mean, it turned out to be a great game. It was very entertaining. I'm super, super anti-bitching about refs. I hate it in almost all sports.
It was a trash flag, Keith.
It was not the best flag. When I saw it, I was like, this is not great. But it's also I don't think there's any question that the ref calling that call, that was the correct call based on the rule, right? That rule, but the rule was clearly violated in that moment. The counter argument is, oh, they don't call it on every other play. Well, I can't really speak to that. I don't know how many other holds happened or didn't happen. But we had this discussion in our Discord, and I said the same thing there, and so I'll share it with our listeners. It's like speeding. Many of us speed. Many of us go 10, 15 miles over the speed limit or whatever, and that there is a chance you will get a ticket doing that. Even if every other car around you is going the same speed or faster, you might be ticketed. And if the officer pulls you over, are you going to say, well, everybody else was doing it and you didn't pull them over? No, you're going to be like, sorry, sir.
I mean, I legitimately would say something along those lines. I would say I was going with the flow of traffic.
That's not a real law. Flow of traffic is a made up thing.
I know, but okay. I feel like we've had this argument about Ultimate because I'm saying in that moment, the ref needs to keep the flag in his pocket. You just don't throw that flag on that play. And I'm not saying that you should never call a foul if, in a situation late in the game where it's close, because, foul is a foul, but that was not a clear and obvious hold that determined the outcome of the play.
He grabbed the jersey. Not. That's almost always a flag. He knows it.
I know, but
it's his job to make the play without violating the rule. He knows that's a flag. He knows that there's a risk. And what's even worse, Charlie, is that that's the exact worst case outcome. He should have given up the touchdown. This team literally tries to give up a touchdown after that. He should have tried to give up a touchdown instead of holding. Your options were play great defense or don't play any defense, and he didn't choose either. He went in the middle.
I truly don't think. I think that play that we saw, that kind of hand check happens on 75% of snaps. I mean, I don't feel like it's an appropriate flag in the situation. But you know what? If it was self-officiated, it was going to get called. I think we can agree on that.
And I do think it was Juju. I don't know if you saw Juju's tweet, Valentine's Day tweet. I thought it was very corny of him. He basically sent a tweet saying with James Bradbury's picture, it said, this is somebody who will hold you when it matters most or something like that. That's come on, bro. That's mad corny. But my other thing about this is that then this shifts all the onus. Everybody's just like, oh, well, how can the refs decide the game like that? They didn't. You know what decided the game? Jalen Hurts fumbling away a touchdown. All right.
That's true.
That's what decided the game. And everybody's going to be like, oh, what about the refs? No, the Eagles made plenty of mistakes.
The Eagles secondary just completely falling apart twice on the same play on opposite sides of the field to give up the easiest touchdowns of the playoffs.
And really a third time, because Juju was basically running that same route again and Bradbury screwed it up. I don't know. Those are the things. And I'm sure the Eagles are talking about that. They're not over there complaining about the refs. They're thinking about wow, we could have won that game. We played a great game. We had a good game plan, but we didn't execute in the second half. I'm sure that that's what they're thinking about. And I think that's what most people should be thinking about. But also, hey, Mahomes went out there and won it with a pretty unimpressive, uninspiring cast aside from Travis Kelce and basically no defense. So guy's a superhero.
And the O-line gave up 0 sacks to the best pass rush in the league. Very impressive.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, we're going to get into some more college talk today, of course. We had Queen City tune-up this past weekend, UN sweep. And then we also will look ahead to Prez Day coming up this weekend down in San Diego. Before we get to that, though, a couple little bits of news to discuss on the player transaction front. Transaction is an interesting word to use, I suppose.
Trade deadline.
Minnesota Strike announcing that Sarah Mextroth will be back on the roster this year, not playing for the Radiants. And that is a huge pickup, Keith. I mean, not only does that weaken the Radiants, but it strengthens this Minnesota team that I don't think a lot of people would have picked preseason, before we saw rosters, to get out of that division. But now I think, you have to put them on the radar.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a MVP quality player, and Minnesota didn't exactly set the world on fire in their debut season or anything, but there's certainly going to be ample opportunity for them to do well. And Mex coming back home, so to speak, a player who I think most people associate with Minnesota. It'll be nice to have that kind of star power around the franchise, and on the field, obviously huge ramifications. What does it do to Radiance's status as the favorite, out and out favorite, I think, at this point right now, as we wait to see more rosters and things like that come out. But this is a great signing, and it's exciting. I honestly think it's good for the league.
I agree that it's good for the league. I don't think I downgrade Radiance beyond still being number one in the power rankings, but I think it's marginally less likely that they win now. I mean, I don't think there's any way around that. But the problem is Shadow is getting players poached by Philly Surge. And I think that's really the problem, is that you see DC and you're like, okay, last year's DC team could probably have had a real opportunity to be the best team in the league. And as it stands right now, I just don't see that. But, I've been hearing some buzz. New York's apparently going to be signing some pretty interesting players. So we'll see what that roster shapes up to be. And I mean, it looks like we're going to have some surprises in the cards as these rosters roll out.
Should be fun. And maybe we'll get a really exciting regular season with a lot of parity, and that leads to a thrilling finish.
And looking ahead to the club season, well, number one, what's Sarah Mextroth going to do this club season? Of course, she played for Raleigh Phoenix this past year, but is this a signal that maybe she's going to be back with Dragon Thrust? As of this moment, when we record this podcast on Wednesday, February 15th, don't know the answer to that, but certainly something to keep an eye on, because wherever she goes or wherever she stays, she's going to have a huge impact on whatever team and division that she's in. In the club men's division, Keith, the rumors have truth behind them. Dylan Freechild is going to be suiting up for Portland Rhino Slam this season. He is leaving Sockeye after years with the team, winning a championship in 2019 when he also won Player of the Year. They could not get back to the top. Dylan's been living in Southern California, but he's moving back to Oregon and is ready to stop being a travel player, which he's done for 6 years. Just talked about wanting to give some of his final years of his peak career, he's 32, to Portland. And so he's going back to Rhino. And I mean, I remember the days of watching Dylan try to hold it down and beat Sockeye in big games at regionals and nationals. And then he, ultimately makes the switch, wins a title, but now he's going home to a team that is better than Sockeye right now. Let's just acknowledge that. But wow, what a storyline, Keith. Dylan Freechild heading back to Portland.
Is he ring chasing? Or are we? There's a lot of fun.
This is LeBron-esque. This is LeBron-esque. I mean, I don't know if Dylan should be considered at that level in terms of as a player, but he's still a World Games player. He's still one of the best players in the division. And I think this is maybe a 2-year window right now for Rhino to actually go get a title. It could happen.
And the knock on Rhino for a while, I think, has been that they only have a couple players that they can rely on to really take over a game. I think that's been changing in part due to their development. I think last year they had a little more depth in places, but how much does it change the equation to add Dylan Freechild next to Raffiers?
It's massive. I mean, I don't think it can be overstated, because I think Dylan's going to come in and shore up offense. one of the problems that Rhino had was that they often didn't have that connective tissue between their handlers and their deep cutters, which, was primarily Rafi and Leandro doing kind of everything downfield. And it worked a lot. I mean, it worked against most teams. That's how they got to semifinals. The problem is they go up against that really tough Bravo defense, and they just didn't have enough answers on offense. And Dylan gives you answers on offense. You can put him anywhere. And he can cross over, obviously. And, he's just going to be the best player in most matchups. So I think it's a huge deal. He's super motivated to get back out there and try to win a title for a city that's never won one. Portland never won a national championship in any division.
Not a bad free agency period here in Ultimate.
Pretty exciting stuff. So we'll see what comes of that. And we'll, of course, talk about it more as we get into the club season in a couple of months. Queen City Tune-Up taking place this weekend in Rock Hill, South Carolina. UNC gets the sweep, dominant performances in both the women's and men's divisions. UNC over Vermont in the women's division, 4-goal win for them there. And over in the men's division, UNC taking down Tufts in the final, 15-6, the score of the men's game, 11-7, the score of the women's game. Keith, no surprise here to see UNC winning these tournaments, but, pretty dominant fashion. Maybe some bumps on the road for the Pleiades offense, but I don't really think we've seen these teams really, truly challenged yet.
No, North Carolina did get a bit of a test in the women's division final. They were kind of step for step with Vermont for a lot of that game. Ellie Youngst went out with injury, and that might have made things a little bit tougher. And they pulled away in the end, though, and that's what kind of gave you that 11-7 score. But for a lot of the way, it was a 1-2 point game, and they looked like they were up against a real challenger, and we have not seen anything like that at all along the way for them. So that's a good test, but also it says a lot about where Vermont is at right now. But UNC able to go out there and get the win. Obviously, in the conditions, you hate to see like these short scores. Definitely, I'm looking forward to seeing what UNC is going to have when they play against some other strong competition, because they haven't seen teams the likes of Vermont quite yet until this point. Now, they did dominate Tufts in semifinal 12-5. That's a great win. Tufts is good, and they looked good at Queen City, but UNC can just make those good teams look average.
Yeah, I mean, and sticking in the women's division, great recap up on the site right now from Bridget Meisner, talking about the real separation that we saw from the top 4 teams. UNC, Vermont, of course, and then the other 2 semifinalists, Tufts and Carleton. Tufts getting a really nice 10-8 win over Carleton in the third place game. So, I think the hype is real about Tufts and, New England region looking really strong right now. The question is, what is the ceiling for these teams? Like Vermont, I actually think ceiling is a championship. Ceiling is a championship. I think it's a stretch, but I think it's possible. For the other teams, I'm not sure that I'm there. Feels like semis would be about as far as I could see them going. But early tournament, kinks to work out. I think all of those teams have shown some things early in the season that make you, as if you're a fan of the teams, you got to be confident about what they're going to be able to do later this year.
Absolutely. And Vermont, definitely an impressive showing. I think a lot of people are going to walk away buying into what we've been selling about them. The talent is there. Now they're starting to put together the experience. They've got these young players who are also not afraid to step up into big environments. I mean, everything's really lined up for them. They're getting good transfers. They're getting good recruits. They're returning everybody. Like, what is there not to like about Vermont other than that we haven't seen them do it before, which I will say is often a fairly big barrier to overcome in Ultimate. We just talked about that all year, though, with Molly Brown, right? Like, sometimes you can't do it until you do. And that may be the case with this Vermont team. It's unfortunate for them that they'll have to do it against teams as accomplished as, in particular, a UNC team that just has so much returning from last year's squad. I don't know what the window is going to look like for Vermont. I don't think it's going to be one season long, but they're legitimate challengers. I like Carleton and Tufts, but I think I'm kind of in the same boat that semis might be as high as I'm gonna feel like their ceiling could go. Maybe I could feel a little better about Tufts, but I even then, losing to North Carolina 12-5 is a pretty decimating score. So I still like this Tufts team though.
It's an interesting thing because all four of those teams just absolutely crushed everybody in pool play. And then we had a rain out day a little bit on Sunday. They had to kind of not use the grass fields, switch to the turf. Rounds were short, games were short, and they only had 4 teams into semis. Now, ultimately, I think all those teams would have comfortably made semis anyway, so we still got to see the matchups. But I am excited to see bigger tests for really all of these teams. But Carleton offering some nice connectivity, because I do want to point this out. Carleton goes out west, they win SBI, and then they come out here and they play well. It was a solid weekend for them. But ultimately, they do lose to Vermont 9-8, and they lose to Tufts 10-8. They did not play UNC. You figure they probably lose that game by 5 or 6 goals. I think ultimately, the power rankings that we had coming into the weekend feel like they were about right in terms of the relative positions of, Carleton and the West Coast teams, and then these East Coast teams that we expected to be good. So I think we're going to have a lot of really interesting battles and, kind of trying to get into like that quarterfinals range at nationals, just kind of looking at the early season so far. But I still feel like we've seen separation from the likes of UNC. Obviously, we haven't seen Colorado yet or UBC yet, but I think both of those teams clearly are going to be really, really good. And then it's just like, who's going to be that fourth and final semifinalist?
Top 4 are a clear spot above it at this tournament, but shout out to the teams that finished behind them, who I think a good weekend for Michigan, for Minnesota, who's a team who's not really on the radar. I'm very curious now about where this Minnesota team will be at as they move through the year. And they went down with a pretty small group and come back successful. You can't imagine that they're getting a lot of time to play outside. And overall, good weekends for Great Lakes. Michigan, Notre Dame, both did well. Chicago and Claire Schmidt looked pretty good. Bad weekend for the Southeast. Georgia drops out of the top 25 with, they finished like 15th or 16th overall. And Florida and Florida State both struggling. So looks like the Southeast is back down in the doldrums, and it already feels like they're pretty much, it's fait accompli for them to have a one bid year. But the Great Lakes, could it be Great Lakes great times this year? It could be.
But here's the thing: Minnesota wins over Notre Dame and Michigan. That's big. That's big for the North Central. It's obviously early, but their resume, I think, is going to hold up pretty well when it comes to that comparison at that bid bubble. They're going to have to play well later this year, but 10-6 loss to Virginia. They got absolutely stomped by UNC, but it's going to be a blowout rule game. It's going to get dropped, and I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal at the end of the day. I think Minnesota has done the things that they've needed to do so far to at least be in the conversation for getting a bid.
Love to hear bid watch. It's so nice to have it back. UVA clearly established themselves as number 2 in the AC.
And I feel like they're locked to get a bid. They're very good team. All right, looking at the men's division, of course, UNC rolling. Tufts, though, surprise. I think it has to be considered a surprise finalist because everybody picked NC State. You picked them, I picked them, the subscribers picked them. And Tufts beat them 11-10 in semifinals. So really nice showing for Tufts. They get through pretty comfortable wins over everybody else. All the teams not in the top 25, dominant victories. And then they get that nice close win over NC State. And then they do get crushed by UNC. But UNC is just simply on another level from these teams. So pretty impressive start for Tufts. Keith, I know you've been high on them. Does this reinforce your view?
Well, as the picks can attest, this is even better than I expected from them. Or maybe it's worse for NC State. Depends on what angle you're looking at this from. But Oscar Graf looking strong. This Tufts team, I think, has some players on it, and they're going to contend in that competitive New England region. And given what we've seen from Northeastern and Vermont and even Brown, why not Tufts? It's hard to imagine that one of the teams in in that region is so far better that they're going to be able to walk through, except for perhaps UMass. So UMass has gotten out to an early lead, but it looks like it's going to be a pit fight for the rest of the region because Tufts looks pretty dang good. And that was not a fluky win over NC State for Tufts. And yeah, they got, run out of the gym by UNC. That's going to happen to a lot of teams, especially coming off a big emotional upset in semifinals. But a strong showing for Tufts to start the season.
Yeah, and a lot of interesting stuff down the board too, Keith. I mean, UNC Wilmington, how about their performance this weekend? I mean, they dropped a 1 game to NC State, and they do have some close wins, but a lot of, in fact, 3 1-goal wins. But they beat Case Western, South Carolina, Penn State, Wash U. These are bubble type teams. So AC has to feel pretty good about that. Maybe NC State not quite as good as we thought, but I think UNC Wilmington looking a little bit better than expected. And frankly, South Carolina had a good weekend. Had they won that Wilmington game, I think I would have felt a little bit better about things overall. But I feel like the AC held down the home court here in Rock Hill.
AC looks like it's going to be extremely competitive down the line, depending on the number of bids. If they get 3 bids, watch out. We've seen good moments from South Carolina. William & Mary had a good weekend. Wilmington, are they back? Is UNC Wilmington back? I mean, according to Twitter, there's some parts of UNC Wilmington are back. But, you can dig down the rabbit hole if you want, but there could be some talent. I look at this roster. Cole Feldman is still at Wilmington? Question mark? That's a good player to be able to have a focus on. And they also have some good recruits. So keep an eye out on Wilmington. We've talked so much about the ACE because there's so many teams. It feels like you have to consider in the mix. UNC Charlotte, Duke, Virginia. It's just a long list.
Hey Keith.
It's gonna be tough.
Hey Keith. Who did you just not mention in the AC? Yeah, Maryland. Fraud alert.
Oh, yeah.
What did I say? What did I say on this show? This team had no business being in the top 25 to start the year, and then they come out here at Queen City, everybody hype. And what do? They go 3-3. They get blown out by Tufts. They lose by 4 to South Carolina. They lose to Wash U. They get a close win over App State. I mean, there's nothing here that says they're anything besides a regionals team. Now, they were without their coach this weekend. So no Daryl Stanley down there, and they have a couple of really talented players. It seems like Fred Farah was just killing it as expected, but I'm sorry, this team isn't deep enough. This team doesn't, the discipline isn't there. These results tell me the same thing that I've been seeing for years and years. Too much hype train for this team.
Tough seed for the College Park guys. The region's just so tough that you can't not bring it. You can't be mid and show up at regionals and expect things to go your way.
What else stands out to you from the men's side, Keith?
Well, the AC certainly is a big part of it. A big part of the stuff that I look at and I see about this tournament and feel like it's important. We did get our first look at Ohio State though, and they looked pretty solid. I think this is more or less what we expected from them. Back into the top 25 team who probably has a ceiling for more, but a floor for less. There's a kind of a wide range of outcomes here, but this is an important year for them to be able to kind of establish themselves as this program. And they end up finishing 4th. They lose to North Carolina in semis and gave North Carolina their best game of the weekend. Lost 10-8 in kind of messy conditions. I think it's hard to pull away in that kind of situation. Lost to NC State in the 3rd place game. But yeah, I think that they're going to be solid contenders. This is a good start for their bid quest. Obviously they don't want to have to go through Pitt. They'd like a little cushion. Case Western looks solid at this tournament. So yeah, I think Ohio State, good debut for them. Not great, but they kind of gave up that spot to Tufts. If they could have been Tufts, there's some world in which they ran the Tufts kind of path, but they had to go through UNC in semis, and that's going to put a blocker on that in some ways.
Yeah, and I mean, the only thing that really dampens the weekend is that they lose by 5 to NC State
right
in the 3rd place game. without that result, it's pretty great weekend, because not only do they keep it close with UNC, the closest anyone has kept it with UNC by kind of a distance. The closest game after the 2-goal win that UNC had over Ohio State was a 4-goal win over UNC Charlotte, and I think that's it. So that's going to be a good result from the algorithm perspective. And then they crushed Notre Dame. They beat William and Mary by 3, a team that only lost that one game. So really nice weekend, I would say, for Ohio State, and they are in good position for a bid after this tournament.
All in all, I think that we saw the top 4 seeds in both divisions look like the strongest teams there. Obviously, a smaller gap in the men's division than we saw in the women's division, but a lot of regional pecking order kind of stuff at play, which is what we expect from these early season tournaments. Going to be interesting once we start to see more teams travel out of region, more teams playing in more competitive events. Once we get those big majors that start to collect a lot of top level teams, really going to start to get a sense of who the best squads are.
So that's going to close the book on Queen City Tune-Up, and we look ahead to the coming weekend for the Prez Day Invite right after the break.
Hey there, my name is Jody African, and I'm the host of a new podcast from TED called Good Sport. I've learned a ton of life lessons from playing sports, from watching sports, and from covering sports in my career as a journalist. During our first season of Good Sport, we'll look at hotbeds of talent, how a new sport like F1 can break through, how to deal with aging out of playing sports at the highest level, and lots more. Check out Good Sport wherever you listen.
Welcome back to Deep Look. Prez Day coming up at UC San Diego this weekend. It's the debut of Colorado in both divisions, so that's going to be pretty exciting. Otherwise, it looks a lot like the field we saw at the Santa Barbara Invite. The best of the West out here. The only team that I feel like we're really missing, Keith, is UBC, who we won't see until the Stanford Invite. But it's going to be an exciting start. Do you expect Colorado to show up and win in both divisions? They will be the favorites.
Well, I at least expect them to show up. If they like literally don't arrive at the tournament, I'll be probably disappointed. But I feel like if I'll put the money on the the minus 700 that they're gonna actually arrive at the tournament. But yeah, I mean, how can you not paint them as the favorites going into this event, even sight unseen? I mean, these are powerhouse programs coming off great years with lots of returners, and not exact, like there are good teams in the field, but there aren't those like tier 1 top level challengers exactly in this field either. So they're those foils. So I think Colorado's going to be the heavy favorites in both divisions going into this weekend.
In some ways, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what kind of margins of victory do they have? How sharp do their offenses look? Where are they in their development right now? Those are interesting things. Kind of the same way that it was sort of interesting to see what UNC was up to this weekend, even though we knew they were going to win. In a lot of ways, it's much more interesting after that. So this is kind of Queen City of the West. Is Stanford going to continue to be, the best Southwest team in the women's division? What are we going to see from Oregon? I'm really interested in Oregon in both divisions, to be honest. Do we see them take steps forward from what we saw from them at SBI a couple of weeks ago? And Santa Cruz in the men's division, are they for real? Because this is prove it time. You can have a great SBI, but if you then come out and lay an egg, the hype's going to die down quick. Now, I mean, I think they are. I think they're really good, but they're going to have to come out and prove it. They get a nice, comfortable start. And this is an interesting tournament because it's a 3-day tournament. Pool play tends to have kind of some lopsided matchups, but then you get to power pools and it's all heat all the way through to the finals. So teams get a lot of opportunities to play against teams at their level. And I think that's something that's really nice. You may only get 1 or 2 competitive games at a typical tournament. Here, you're going to get 3, 4, maybe 5.
And definitely some exciting debuts across both divisions here. Charlie, if you were going to pick one team in each division And that was the only team you got to see any tape of. Who are the teams you're most interested to see? Just one per division.
One per division, huh? I think in the men's division, I'm probably going to say Washington. And on the women's side, Texas.
Wow.
Where are they at?
I'm surprised by both of those picks. I thought my Washington pick was going to be surprising on the men's side, but we're aligned on that. I got to see what this Washington team looks like after such a rough start.
Exactly.
Hopefully with a more complete roster, but also just like recalibrated. That's got to be a shock to the system for a Washington team that's not used to taking L's. That usually they're a pretty strong regular season club. So what's the rebound look like? I think they're probably going to play slow if the schedule that we're seeing now on Wednesday holds in pool play. And then obviously if they get into power pools, plenty of competition to be had there. Can this team rebound? They're not in our top 25, which is a shocking place to be at this point in the season. Definitely not something I would have predicted. No way. So they're actually probably the team I want to see the most. Sorry, Emory, in your West Coast trip. In the women's division, I'm surprised you went Texas and not Oregon. I thought Fugue would be the team for sure.
I'm feeling like I saw them at SBI, but that's just not true. They played at Bellingham. So yeah, I mean them too, for sure. I mean, I just said as much. I'm very interested to see what they can do. And they're going to get some tough matchups right away. They get Stanford in pool play.
Yeah, but how they respond to these tests is definitely the thing I want to see. Like, obviously, I want to see where both of the Colorado teams are at coming into the year. Do they really look like the real deal, the real title contenders? There are plenty of storylines in both divisions, but if I had to pick one, I want to see what this new Fugue team looks like. And it's a lot of pressure to come out in your first event and do really well. So I wouldn't be surprised if they perhaps don't quite live up to the hype yet, especially considering that a lot of the players we're counting on to be good for them are going to be playing for the first time, playing for their first competitive college ultimate. That's not exactly an easy thing to do, but I'm very curious where they're going to stand. And like you said, we're going to get to see some tests for them right away.
Yeah, this Oregon team has been on the come up, and they're getting some really exciting young talent coming out of that South Eugene team that's just been so dominant at the high school level. Trout Waybright joins this team. What are they going to be able to do in their first year? Early returns from fall, early spring, very positive. And then Cyrus Linkfield. There's going to be some chemistry there. I think that this team's, I guess the thing is, I don't know what their ceiling is. And maybe that we're going to learn a little bit about that this weekend.
That's exactly right. It is hard to know exactly. This is feels like such a high variance team from the information that we have right now. So they're also a team that, because they have so many young players, they could change a lot over the course of the year. The team that they play like now could be very different from the team we see at regionals and potentially nationals. The development pipeline really can change the course of how a team looks and what their fortunes are throughout the year. But there are a number of different types of tests to be had at this tournament. And I think that's good for Oregon, having to play the likes of Colorado, Stanford, and UCSB, but also having to go up against teams like Cal and Texas potentially. These are teams that are further down the rungs on the ladder, but will give Oregon different types of tests to measure themselves by, and also by extension, us to measure them by from the outside.
Well, we're going to be live streaming 2 games per round from Prez Day, so we hope you'll tune in. You can watch all those games video.ultiworld.com with a Fuller Plus subscription or with a 2023 college team pack still on sale right now. Go to ultiworld.com/subscribe to find out more. So, Keith, it's time to make some picks. And let's review last week's picks as well. I would like to review last week's picks. Let's take a look. How did it go, Keith?
Well, for Charlie, went quite well. Charlie, with the sweep in the women's division, he gets UNC and Vermont. He's the lone picker with that. And he also had UNC in the men's division to win the tournament. He had NC State in the final, just like everybody else did. So everybody got that one equally wrong. The only differentiating factor is that Charlie had Vermont. Both the subscribers and I had Carleton making the final in the women's division. So Charlie is gets the advantage and now has the lead over the group. Charlie has 18 points. I have 17 points, and the subscribers have 16 points.
All right. And we look ahead to this weekend. Look, I'm taking Colorado in both divisions. It's I don't quite want to call it a lock, but I feel pretty confident about it. We do sometimes see one of those teams or sometimes both come out a little flat at this tournament. It does happen, but I think there's just too much talent on both of these rosters. A lot of continuity from very strong rosters from last year. I think the biggest question for me is on the men's side, how do they deal with Alex Atkins' departure? He was a big part of what they were doing last year. I think they have plenty of talent to deal with that, but it is still shoes to fill. And how does their offense look without Atkins out there?
It is the big question. I want to see how their new rookies are fitting in with the team. Nondaman Fink, Ryan Shigley, what are their roles going to look like for this team? And I don't think it's going to be a layup for them. You know, I think that they're like comparative to UNC at Queen City Tune-Up last week and Colorado Quandary in the women's division. This is the shortest odds I think I would give a team of winning the tournament from that top tier, from that Colorado UNC tier. Because I think SLO, with action already under their belt, they've already gotten a chance to play. I think they're going to be a worthy contender. And I think some of these other teams are just as good. In fact, I'm going to have a different team in the final against Colorado. But like you, I'm riding with Colorado. There's no way around it.
I am taking SLO in the other finalist in the men's division. I'm going with Stanford in the women's division. Keith, who you got?
Charlie, I am taking Colorado to take on Oregon in the men's division. I liked what I saw from Oregon. Yes, I know that UC Santa Cruz is in this field and Oregon lost to them last time, but that Oregon team was missing a couple key pieces, so I'm kind of counting on them being back. I haven't had the best luck with roster predictions so far for various reasons, but I'm just going to start to assume the teams are going to have everybody unless I know somebody's hurt. So this Oregon team, I'm counting on them to have the pieces back. They had a couple of young players who were in their first tournaments, so those players are going to be a little more seasoned now. I like the talent level, and we've seen what happens with Ego. And Ego is one of those teams that somehow feels like they stay the same, even as the cast changes. They're just a brand unto itself. And I feel like when I watch them, I mean, maybe it's my own biases that make me see the same things from them, but like they come out, they play this strong, speedy offense, and that works for them. And sometimes we've seen them just ride that to really strong performances, to upsets where teams just struggle to get breaks on them. I could see that playing out for this Oregon team. I really like UCLA. I like SLO. I even think Santa Cruz has some chops, but I'm going to take Oregon to emerge from that group of teams that I think all have a shot at being in the final. And you're taking Stanford on the women's side? Man, I've gone back and forth on this. I'm really coin flipping between Stanford and Santa Barbara. I'm not going to lie to you, Charlie. I kind of want to pick Santa Barbara, but I'm really sick of having the same picks as the subscribers. It's like getting on my nerves. Every time I feel like I'm going to pick something that they don't pick, I end up picking with them. I've picked the exact same thing as the subscribers for 2 straight weeks. At least, you know what? At least I'm different in the men's division. I'm going to go with Santa Barbara here. I'm taking Santa Barbara.
You are going to go Santa Barbara. Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm going to take Colorado against Santa Barbara in the women's division with Colorado taking home the win.
I actually really like Stanford's trajectory potential because their offense is still raw, but has a lot of room to get better. And I think they have all of the right pieces. Just love the systems, love the coaching staff. And I think they're going to continue to improve. So I'm going to buck the trend again. I was right last week. We'll see if I'm right again. I'm taking Stanford. Keith's taking UCSB. So are the subscribers. The subscribers are going with Colorado and UCSB in the women's final. Colorado, they're picking for the championship. And on the men's side, they're going Colorado and Cal Poly, with Colorado taking it down. So interesting to see UCSB get the pick from the subscribers. Mostly we've seen the subscribers go pretty straight chalk.
I think that I would expect, like if you asked me to pick now, I would expect Stanford to win the Southwest, to be the best team in the Southwest. But I don't think that they're so far ahead of the rest of the Southwest that they're going to sweep they're going to be the top finishing team at the Southwest Triple Crown, as our Graham Gerhardt called it. So I don't expect them to be that top Southwest team at each of those tournaments because I think that they're going to have to slip up somewhere. So I think this is a perfectly good spot for a talented UC Santa Barbara team that definitely has the returners and to take one over on Stanford and be the stronger side, even though I do like Stanford in the long run. It
was really close at SBI, 8-7 to Stanford. Both teams are going to get better. Both teams are going to get a lot better, I would say, over the course of the season. So we'll see what happens. Should be fun. So those are our picks for Prez Day. Coverage begins on Saturday. That is February 18th, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. And runs through Monday, the 20th. Happy President's Day, everybody. Hope you get a day off work. And we'll see you on the other side. I'm actually going to be away for a couple of weeks. Keith, thanks for holding it down while I'm on vacation.
Yeah, you want to hear from Charlie for a little while. Maybe I'll have him call in and or maybe he'll surprise me or something.
I'll make my picks.
Yeah, we'll get Charlie's picks, but maybe we'll get the audio of your picks. I don't know. You spare some time for some audio. The listeners are going to miss your dulcet tones, you know?
I'll see what I can do. Maybe I can just, I'm not going to take a microphone with me, but I can record it on my phone.
Well, stay tuned, folks, for what's going to be planned for the next couple of weeks. But expect to have some guests drop by and chat with me about what's going on in Ultimate and all the news and happenings, of course, in College Ultimate. Love me some good College Ultimate.
That is going to do it for this edition of Deep Look. For Keith Rayner, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week right here on Deep Look.